All right. Hi, everybody. Come on in. Welcome back to a Holler Hour here at the Tennessee Holler. I'm Justin. That's Cassie.
Hello.
This is the Holler Hour, Tuesdays, Thursdays, 2 p.m. We missed this Tuesday because I was at the legislature bothering people. But here we are. We're going to try to make up for it. Thank you for joining us. As a reminder, this is what we do at 2 p.m. on the weekdays, Tuesday and Thursday. And if you have something you want to holler at us about, let us know. We'll try to get you in here to talk to us live from wherever you are about whatever's on your mind. And as always, we appreciate all the support that you give us. We have hollers all across the state because of you, so follow them all. We actually just added another one last night. The Clarksville Holler is now a thing, which I'm pretty excited about because I ran for Congress and Clarksville was a big part of my district. So check it out, Clark's Holler on Twitter. How you doing, Cassie?
Doing pretty well. It's just kind of a fire hose right now between the legislature and impeachment. So got the state and federal stuff going and excited. Yeah, super stoked to have Clarksville Holler up and running because that's been a big one that we've wanted for a while.
Absolutely. And you know who else I'm sure is really excited about it is probably Mark Green is really excited to see
your buddy.
That the Clarksville Holler exists. Let's talk about impeachment, shall we? I mean, impeachment happened. This guy made history. He is going down very far in history as the only guy ever to be impeached twice. Well-deserved. Couldn't have happened to a worse human being.
More well-deserving.
Oh, it's so well-deserved for him to be.
So much.
He's a trivia question answer now, and, it was really awesome. And my favorite part was watching these, extremely divisive people suddenly call for unity and say, oh, we shouldn't do this impeachment thing, because really that's the divisive thing, not the whole insurrection, attack on our Capitol part, incitement to that. No, it's the accountability part that's really going to be divisive. And our buddy Mark Green wrote this in Clarksville Now. He said, every one of us has a role to play in bridging the divide. Mark fucking Green said that. But my favorite part of that is while he said that, this was the pinned tweet on the top of his page. We cannot allow the American dream to be destroyed by socialism. Like, the guy has no idea what unity is. He wouldn't know how to be cordial. He's a mess.
He's just an ideological mainliner. He's just mainlining his super uber conservative ideology and whining about being. Yes, it's so fake. He can't even say anything else. He can't have a thought. He doesn't have a thoughtful comment on anything that I've seen. It's always just toe the party line, do whatever's politically advantageous, and whine about divisiveness when his own party is the one that's sowed, the seeds and lit the fire for this insurrection that happened last week.
It's wild. And it's always the most absurd people that are the loudest about unity, right?
Marjorie Taylor Greene. Well, she wasn't even talking about unity.
No, she didn't even try. But this guy, Madison Cawthorn, have you seen this guy? He's a white supremacist Nazi. He's in a wheelchair, young, handsome guy in a wheelchair. He is straight up Nazi, dude. He's a Hitler enthusiast.
Wow.
There's pictures of him visiting the sites of Hitler and giving thumbs up. This was what he said about Cory Booker. He gave He earlier this week, his campaign put up a website slamming his opponent for, alleging that the Pulitzer Prize winning local journalist Fiedler worked with Davis allies. And he described him as working for non-white males like Cory Booker, who aims to ruin white males.
Wow.
This guy is now a representative. And this was the first thing he tweeted when he won.
Oh, this guy.
Cry more, lib. And now this guy wants us to have unity.
We want to unify with that guy. Anybody that wants to unify with people like him is insane. We cannot have unity. There's actually this really great speech that Dr. Reverend William Barber gave a while back about how you cannot have unity. You need some disunity in order to one day potentially have unity. And of course, that means accountability for this type of ideology. You can't ever have a comfortable unity or a moral unity with people like that. It's just impossible, and we should never allow it.
Right. And that's what people need to keep in mind as we move forward. And, it's nice that we're seeing some Republicans now come across, and, this is sort of the last stop on the train. If you're going to get off, now's the time. And 10 of them did, to their credit, and we'll see what happens in the Senate. I like that Lauren Sorensen says Mark Green wouldn't know socialism if it was deposited in his bank as a paycheck, which it actually is being deposited in his bank as a paycheck. And he is on a state health care plan. So there is all that. But yeah, you can't really have a moral unity with people like this. And you now see a lot of them are like still keeping it up. Representative John Rose, he is like railing against the idea that they're now walling off the Capitol like a fortress for the political elite. Like it's bad somehow to now have security in the wake of a violent insurrection for people who quite literally just nearly got assassinated. And he's saying, oh, you can't wall it off. And he most certainly was not saying anything like that when they had phalanxes of state troopers keeping Justin Jones and the protesters off of that plaza this summer. So there's just no consistency to anything that these people are saying. And we should hear flash the names of the representatives who did vote for impeachment. Here are the 10 of them. Amazing that there were still only 10.
It is amazing. And I credit where credit is due. They definitely deserve credit for that. But it is like kind of another framing to that, to the fact that there are only 10 is like, well, that means 100, like the House Republicans voted 195 to 10 in favor of white supremacy and insurrection against the government.
It's truly remarkable. And, it just shows us where we are. I was at the legislature this week. The Tennessee Republicans seem to have acknowledged now that Biden won, but, I would imagine that they're still cool with Trump running again some point. And
I think he's still favored to be the first. I mean, it's insanely early. Like anything could happen between now and then, but at least based off of the polling right now, he would be the front runner to run again in 2024.
Right. And I'm sure they'd all vote for him. So the idea that they're okay with the election and maybe they're not saying it was stolen anymore, but it doesn't mean that they've learned their lesson. And it doesn't mean that they're in any way, there's any contrition about what happened. So, to call for unity when they're really not unified. Like there was an opportunity here to unify. And that opportunity was for them to get behind impeachment and kick this guy out forever, make sure he can't run again. The unity would have been impeaching.
You're so right.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. No. I totally agree. I mean, it's 100% on them. It is on them to unify with like the right side of history, with the moral and good thing to do for the country, for our democracy. And the same goes for conservative media. I mean, you watch Fox News right now, they're calling for, they're like, well, talking about the left and, censorship and all of these other things, and not focusing on their massive role in gaslighting this. And they're calling for, oh, well, we just need unity. Like impeachment is going to like sow more discord. I'm like, no, it is on you. It is on you, Steve Doocy, and all of these other nutcases on Fox to unify with the people who are doing the right thing in this moment, not to like try to get the rest of us to compromise with a really dangerous ideology that will just lead to this in the future if there's no accountability. It'll just be worse next time.
In the near future. And, we've now seen more and more instances or details that kind of show us this was maybe more coordinated than we even realized. This was one that jumped out at me. This is in Ayanna Pressley's office. Every panic button in my office had been torn out, the whole unit. And another representative said that she thinks now that the tours that were given to these people the day before were reconnaissance missions, which seems entirely possible, come to think of it. And then this was a video that was seen 5 million times now. Let me see if I can find it here. It was a video of them breaking in, and you can actually hear them talking about the schematics of the Capitol.
There's a door to the right. That's a cop.
So they're talking about the building that they're in, and they know where the doors are below them.
We need a plan. We need enough people. We need to push forward.
Anyway, we might not get the sense of it from there, but there's this woman with a megaphone. There she is. Hang on.
One in the rear and one to the right when you go in. So people should probably coordinate together if you're going to take it.
So they had the plans. They knew what was the building looked like.
They had the whole schematics.
details.
They had the tunnels.
Yeah. She's been in the building. This is here. This is there. Like, this was not just, oh, let's push forward. This was coming. And, we've now heard that repeatedly from a number of different sources, and there just need to be hearings. We need to get to the bottom of what happened here.
Yeah.
There's also this guy, Ali Alexander, who was he started Stop the Steal, the hashtag in the group. And he talked about how 3 of the congressmen worked with him to get this done. And he was on tape the night before saying, we're going to light this shit on fire and all of that. So, there needs to be a reckoning. And if I'm a representative in that Capitol right now, I don't trust the people I'm sitting next to.
No, they need to be expelled. They have no place, because there were I can't remember who they were exactly, but there were some of these sort of super far right QAnon, or either adjacent or actual believers, who are in Congress, who were tweeting out, the location of Nancy Pelosi.
Not here anymore. They're over here. Yeah, of course. So
right, an AOC said that at her extraction point, she was extremely uncomfortable being there because she and Ilhan Omar and representatives like that were some of the most vulnerable in this situation. Nancy Pelosi, of course, because of how they've been demonized, and Ilhan Omar for her religion and race alone.
Yeah, they would have been killed. I think there's no question about that.
Oh, no question. AOC said in her video, Instagram live video, which I highly recommend watching. It's about an hour. It's actually really informative and pretty terrifying, that she thought that she was going to die that day because of an experience that she had and she can't disclose the details.
I don't blame her.
100%. It's just the fact that people aren't taking this very seriously is just extremely dangerous, and lays the groundwork for this if it becomes acceptable, it's something that'll be, in the playbook for the future and can be expanded upon.
No question about it. Well, he got impeached. This is the front page today. And let's go ahead and talk to somebody now who might have some insight for us into what we're seeing. Dr. Amy Cooter over at Vanderbilt. Dr. Cooter, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
Good. I'm Justin. That's Cassie. We're
Hello.
here at the Holler. You and I we're sort of Twitter friends, I guess, on there. And appreciate what you do. I guess, why don't you tell us what your bio is at Vandy?
Sure. So at Vandy, I am a senior lecturer in sociology. I have more than 10 years worth of experience studying U.S. domestic militias, mostly in the state of Michigan, but I have contacts throughout the country. And it's been my research goal all along to really try to understand the people in these groups, to understand why they join groups like this, what they get out of that membership. And I've tried to say for a long time, we should be paying more attention to these folks than we traditionally have.
So what initially got you interested in this topic? How did you take on this psychology, militias? What brought you down this road?
Well, I grew up in rural East Tennessee around a lot of folks who hunt and use firearms for recreation in a lot of different ways. When I got to undergrad, I realized that most folks who do research on social movements or on related fields don't pay so much attention to groups on the conservative end of the spectrum. That's a problem for a lot of reasons. It leaves a lot of gaps in literature. It means we don't understand that full political range. And I thought I was well positioned to help address that gap. So when I started graduate school, I tried to pick a place that was kind of amenable to doing this sort of research. And Michigan has always been a hotbed of militia activity. And so my research just sort of took on a life of its own from there. And
so what does the research look like? I know you mentioned in the piece that you just wrote that you did some field work. Did you really spend time out there with these militias, and where did you go, and were you afraid?
Yeah, so most folks who research these groups tend to just look at them online, either exclusively in media reports or on the group's online forums, which are harder to access these days. But the online materials are only a snippet of their full range of behavior, their full interaction, of course. And so I did a variety of other things. I did interviews, one-on-one interviews with them, but I also did what's called ethnography with them, where I actually went out to their meetings, to their training sessions, sometimes at state recreation parks, more often than not, though, on private property out in the middle of nowhere. When I first started this research, I didn't really know what to expect. It would have been dumb not to be a little bit nervous, quite frankly, going into the first few times. But for the most part, these are pretty normal people. If you grow up in a rural part of the country, they have a lot in common with just mainstream rural folks who then can get dragged into politics or other issues pretty easily. And there were a few times that I was a tiny bit concerned for my safety, but there were always times where I anticipated that going into that scenario and felt as well prepared as possible to handle that. Most of the time, these folks were really just trying to convey their sense of urgency about politics and about a variety of other social issues as well.
There was an interesting part of your piece that where you talked about how you would maybe categorize these groups more as like nostalgic groups, which I found very interesting, about wanting to like, sort of recreate or bring back some like idealized version of the past, as opposed to just categorizing them as like straight right wing, which was very interesting. I was just wondering what, because I feel like, there's a lot of overlap between like that also just kind of like being a basis of like right wing ideology in the first place. And I was just wondering if you can like expand upon that a little bit, because I found it very interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point. For me, it helps us understand what militias do have in common with some other groups on the right, including other groups that we saw involved at the Capitol insurrection. Militias, Proud Boys, neo-Nazi groups, and all the groups that kind of messily intersect with those boundaries all have this idea that their ideal version of America is gone, that it was some point in the past, and that it's their job to try to prevent further slippage or even regain that past state. And exactly what that ideal looks like can vary a bit across these groups, but that is the overarching commonality. I think it's also important to note that even though, like I just did, we often use right wing to sort of refer to those groups, the fact of the matter is their politics are more complicated. It's often the case that militia members are quite conservative about gun rights and other things, are genuinely pro-LGBT rights, generally pro-choice. And so that doesn't necessarily fit with what we usually capture with just right wing. And I think we're better off trying to look for better ways to describe them.
With these guys that we see out there, I mean, I know it's sort of different for a lot of them, and you mentioned nostalgia, but it seems like maybe one sort of overarching theme with a lot of them, and is that it kind of gives their life meaning to dive into this stuff and feel like they're fighting for something, especially since a lot of them are veterans. Do you feel like part of it is just belonging to something?
I think that's a big piece of it for a lot of them, and especially perhaps for the ones who are veterans or who had wanted to be in the military but couldn't because of health reasons or other factors. So many of these men, and they are mostly men, but not exclusively, have this idea that it is their personal responsibility to stand up for the nation, for the Constitution as it's supposed to be in their view. And that led a lot of them to military service, that led a lot of them to militia groups or similar groups after their military days were done as well.
One thing that you mentioned, though, I thought the word overtly was maybe doing a lot of work in the sentence, but you mentioned that you didn't find them to be overtly racist or sexist, which, from where I'm sitting, like they obviously are, but, maybe it's not as prevalent as it seems to be. I mean, we focus on the Nazi flags. We see, the white supremacist insignias and sweatshirts, but are you saying you don't think race is a huge part of it, or is it just not overt?
Well, it's because we're, especially at the Capitol event, we're seeing different groups mixing together here. Traditionally, most militias, according to their definition, according to an academic definition, don't usually have that much to do with neo-Nazi groups. Most of them actively try to avoid them. We're in a moment where for the last many months, they've been a lot more comfortable bumping shoulders with them. And I think that's concerning for a lot of different reasons. But usually, militia groups don't have, at the group level, race as part of their organizing ideology. And from what I observed with the groups that I interacted with, it is the distinction between overt and less overt that matters. That if we're talking about any group, militia or not, of mostly sort of working lower middle class white men, they don't necessarily view racism in the full complexity that it has. They recognize the kind of in your face Jim Crow racism that pops to mind for a lot of people, but don't recognize that systematic or institutional racism exists. Don't always understand how stereotypes can feed into other and more subtle kinds of racism today as well.
Part of it, sorry, go ahead, Cassie.
Oh, yeah, no, I just wanted to, I do find that it is interesting. I wonder, have you had any experience with them, like the ones that, aren't overtly racist, but just don't acknowledge like systemic racism or maybe understand it? Like, I mean, you talk about in your piece, and as we all know, I mean, obviously they're trying to bring back this simpler time, this time where all of these marginalized groups, women, Black people, etc., obviously it was much worse for them back then. They didn't have the gains that we've now seen, so I mean, I guess, like, do you have any experience with them? Just, is there any sort of like way that they try to reconcile that, or not reconcile, but like, how do they explain that, I guess, when they're, can they even like explain what kind of simpler time they're trying to get back to? Because obviously that's, to us, or at least for me and probably Justin for sure, like inherently a racist idea just because of like what it means, but obviously that connection maybe is just not being made.
Right, and I think that's mostly what it hinges on here, that so many of them don't really understand our full history of race and racism. We don't have a lot of great education even still today about what slavery looked like, what the civil rights movement was really about. A lot of my students, even still today in high school, are basically taught, oh, the civil rights movement happened, but everybody was pretty much on board with it. We forget what a struggle that was, and forget it wasn't that long ago in the past. So for a lot of these folks, that's jarring, especially if they're in mostly white communities. They don't really know that many Black folk.
Right.
Yeah, and so anytime we talk about race in public, then from their perspective, without that context, it seems overblown. It seems overreaction because they don't have the framework to relate that very much.
It also seems like, they don't have it that great. Like, these people aren't, living high on the hog. They're not, these aren't like exceptionally wealthy people in general. So I feel like it's almost becomes a source of anger when you're like, no, white privilege, and, telling people that they have it better because they're white, and they get like angry about it. And that becomes its own racism because they don't want to be told that, there's racism because they don't have it that good.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I do want to say there's a lot of SES variation in these groups. Some people are incredibly wealthy.
Okay.
The vast majority of them are not, and definitely feel pinched, usually trying to pay their bills on a regular basis in a way that does factor into this, I believe.
Yeah, well, I guess that's a good point. Maybe some of them are just, are not that way. That's just how it seems. From where I'm sitting, it's like, if you really had a lot to lose, would you be risking it all to go do that? But maybe not. So do you think that there's any talking to people like this? Like, is any aspect of what you studied a deprogramming?
So the short answer to that is kind of, back when I was mostly doing my field work, I felt like there was a lot of room for conversation. There was one instance where, for example, one of the groups I was studying had a public meeting. They had advertised it at a local restaurant, and the NAACP got wind of it and came thinking they were going to protest, thinking that the group was there with racist aims. And I was sitting there watching this play out because I thought no one is going to believe that this happened, but the militia members actually invited them in. They had a back and forth dialogue. They ended up exchanging numbers by the end of the night. And some of the militia members had some meaningful conversations about race and why it still matters today in that moment and in the days that followed. So generally, I would like to think the opportunity is still there. Right now, everyone is so divided and so on edge. Yeah. I think we're going to have a cooling off period before we can get to that point, though.
How do you feel that, like, social media and sort of like, I don't know, the tech industry just in more generally and at large, like, plays into some of this and some of these sort of like the radicalization that might happen that coincides with these militias?
Yeah, well, I don't think this is a surprising answer, but those social media spaces certainly do help contribute to those echo chambers where people just hear their own ideas, think that they're validated, and often don't even see something that really challenges those perspectives. As more people are getting deplatformed and pushed to other corners, I'm afraid, at least in the short term, that effect is going to be heightened, actually, because the most fervent believers in some of this stuff are the ones who are really seeking out those back channels and trying to stay connected.
We have a couple of questions here in the comments. First is from Dr. I won't read that name. Were you mostly studying groups in Tennessee or a broader area?
I was mostly studying groups at that time in Michigan in terms of the actual field work, while maintaining connections in pretty much every other state.
I almost got tricked into reading that name because of the way it's written.
It was a little confusing.
I started to say it, and then I didn't say it. I'm glad I didn't. And then our buddy Grant says, do you find that fiscal issues, policies, or social changes are a bigger driving factor for militia groups, especially in terms of recruitment? So fiscal issues like money or social changes?
It's kind of complicated because they're certainly concerned about money, but they don't always have the full picture to understand exactly all the national and other forces that factor into their immediate financial circumstances. Usually it's more about the broader social picture. So with the exception of Trump, we typically see these groups decline in size during Republican administrations because they feel like their needs are kind of relatively taken care of. And then hike back up during Democratic administrations because they feel like that's further away from their ideal America. Trump was different because instead of allaying those fears, he played into them and told people to stay stirred up and prepared to act.
What needs are they thinking are actually being met or are, during a normal Republican presidency, I guess? Like, why is that?
Well, they very heavily focus on gun rights and then the belief that Democrats will infringe on those and Republicans will leave them alone. But generally also any policy that has to do with isolationism more broadly. They prefer Republicans' general stance on immigration as opposed to the Democrats, and usually other issues that get wrapped in there as well.
Just as a last thing, and then we'll get you out of here. I appreciate you doing this and talking to us. And it's at Amy Cooter on Twitter. You mentioned in your piece that they might not be done. Do you feel like this is the beginning of something? And, what do you see in the next few days here, but then also in the coming years?
Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball on this, but I think we're in for the long haul. These folks, not just militias, but everyone who is kind of represented at the Capitol is on edge. They don't trust Biden. They don't trust the Democrats. And so I'm afraid that there is a potential for violence for quite a while to come. From the chatter, I'm seeing some of the groups are backing off the plans that they had for Inauguration Day. So fingers crossed that does end up being true, of course. But just generally, I'm afraid we're going to have to deal with this for quite a while.
You don't have to tell us this if you don't want to. Like, where do you monitor this stuff?
There are some other online platforms that have not been taken offline yet. That's the primary place. I also still have some kind of back channel contacts in different places.
And is this like deplatforming stuff working?
Yes and no. I think long term it is, but as I mentioned, I think the most fervent people are still sticking around and it's making them feel like their First Amendment rights are being attacked. So I'm worried that short term it will actually stir them up more.
What are some longer term solutions that you would maybe recommend just from more of a policy standpoint?
Yeah, policy is tough, especially because the landscape is changing so much right now. And I think a lot of the groups themselves are still figuring out how they want to respond to these things. I think in general, one of the biggest factors is trying to differentiate between these groups, not just militias and everybody else, but specifically which groups are more likely to be prone to violence. We have limited resources. And I found evidence in my research that groups that aren't really causing trouble may be more likely to actually radicalize if we put pressure on them in problematic ways. So it's a really tricky line to try to navigate.
I just think when it comes to this stuff, like, the alternative for these companies was just to keep letting it happen. And that wasn't really a possibility at this point. So they're private companies. This is capitalism. They decided to make a decision. And now suddenly all of these people who say they like capitalism and are against authoritarianism think they shouldn't be able to make a business decision. Like, it's amazing how inconsistent they are when it comes to this stuff. Dr. Cooter, thank you for joining us. Follow her. It's at Amy Cooter on Twitter. And are you on Facebook also? Follow her on Facebook too.
Yeah.
I think she's on there.
Yeah,
and
but that's okay.
maybe we'll check back in with you down the line and see how things are going. But really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
No problem. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting to, see somebody who like has actually been on top of this for a long time, and kind of saw it coming a little bit. And so it's just great to get her insight and hear from her. What I keep saying about our state is like, there's not a whole lot to worry about because they've already taken over the Capitol.
They're already in office.
They're the governor, they're their speaker, they're all of it. So,
what else did they want? And it's not like they're even like the most moderate Republic. Like these are Republicans are like pretty extreme. So
they're
like
extreme.
friends. They're like would be buddies with these guys.
I will say, like, we're being a little unfair though, because they did just appoint a few new officers and there was a lot of diversity among these officers. One guy had hair. So if that's not diversity, I don't know what is. They've clearly gotten the message that they need to reflect the world that we're in.
Diversity of thought as well, too.
Yes, very much a lot of diversity of thought. Yes.
They've got all the diversity going on.
Speaking of people in Nashville, Ben Shapiro, who, Politico for some reason decided to I don't know what he did, he was like a guest editor or something today.
Unbelievable.
And his first sentence was like, howdy, y'all. But forget about that for a minute. This was my favorite thing of the week from Ben Shapiro. He decided to go ahead and defend zip tie guy.
Right.
Which, I don't even know how you do that, but here he is basically saying, oh, everybody's got zip ties. Like when the guy that
kind of zip tie.
Yeah, they're flex cuffs.
Right, exactly.
And his mother, there's video of these people walking towards the Capitol and the mother's going, I want to drag them outside and have a conversation with them. Like, this was not an innocent situation, Ben. I know he has to be the contrarian in every situation, but you don't really have to defend the people who are trying to kidnap our Congress people. Like,
I know,
you can take a break for a fucking day, man.
Honestly, go for a walk. Like, what are you doing?
Every single thing he's got to be the contrarian on.
Yeah.
Today, the big thing in Nashville at the Capitol, and something that everybody should be aware of, is the block grant situation. Have you seen? My screen just got really big. Hang on, I got to zoom out.
Oh, sure.
Okay, yeah, the block grant situation. Basically, just to give everybody kind of a little overview of what the block grant is. Republicans have refused to expand Medicaid in Tennessee, which would cover 300,000 people. Instead, they've been pushing this idea of essentially getting our whole Medicaid program given to us as a lump sum with fewer strings attached. And in return, they also would be able to keep the savings that they get from running Medicaid the way that they believe is a more responsible way. So it incentivizes them to spend less on Medicaid so that they can keep the savings and spend it on anything else, and they won't commit to what they're going to spend it on. So it won't cover one single more person. And we're basically being asked to trust that this group of people who sat on $730 million in TANF funds will somehow be responsible with the healthcare, with this multi-billion-dollar healthcare program. So they're trying to get their hands on billions and billions of dollars. It's the number one biggest expenditure in our state. Trying to get their hands on billions of dollars so that they can do what they want with it. And no other state has been able to do this.
Put it into reserves. Like, they'll just save
it.
They
probably will. They'll say how fiscally responsible they are. And then on top of that, a Medicaid block grant puts a cap on Medicaid, and a cap is a cut. So if there's a downturn and more people need the help, we could run out of money because of this. So it's a scary thing to do. There's a lot of questions, and they're rushing it through because Trump just signed off on the waiver at the very end of his term. And now today, as we speak, in about an hour and a half, 2 hours, they are going to pass it through the House in a rushed way. They suspended the rules to do this at the very beginning because they want to do this before Biden comes in and overturns it. That's what's going on right now. So we'll play you a video. This was last night in the House and Senate. This was what was going on as they tried to suspend the rules to get this pushed through, which they're currently trying to do.
Motion that I'm about to make deals with suspending the rules that we put in place a short time ago.
This is unprecedented. All of the members should have been notified.
I called the legislative librarian. It's never been done.
The people of Tennessee, hundreds of thousands of them will be affected by this legislation we're attempting to fast forward. They have less than 24 hours notice. The advocates, the healthcare providers,
Those people who are impacted the most will not be able to keep up with the fast track bill.
So they're basically saying that this is all getting pushed through now. And usually in normal times, people would be at the legislature, at the Capitol, giving testimony why this is wrong, hearing from experts. This would be a process where people would say, here's what's wrong, here's what's right. They'd ask questions, but in this situation, they're not doing that. And especially because of COVID, people aren't even allowed in the Capitol right now. So they're just pushing this right through.
To give hundreds of millions of dollars to Tennessee.
So did you see how he started that? He said the opportunity to give hundreds of millions of dollars. He didn't say we'll give it. He didn't say we'll give it. He said it's the opportunity.
Right. Struggling, something that you, sir, have passionately advocated for in the past.
No, they advocated for Medicaid expansion, and Medicaid expansion means that people at 138% of the poverty line would be able to get covered. So right now you have people who are making too much money to afford insurance, but it's not that much money that don't have insurance. We have 300,000 people that fall into that gap. That's what Democrats are fighting for. It's billions of dollars that we've lost by not expanding Medicaid, and this is not the same thing.
And it is a slap in the face to those Tennesseans.
A slap in the face is William Lamberth pretending that this is the same thing.
To say you don't even want to hear the proposal.
We've lost billions of dollars because for whatever reason we decided we're not going to expand Medicaid. Now we're going to spend millions of more dollars trying to defend it all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, and we are going to lose.
Representative Miller is absolutely right. So what he's anticipating happening is Biden will overturn it. Tennessee will sue Biden. We'll end up in the Supreme Court fighting over this, spending millions of dollars, and he thinks we'll lose. And, maybe he's right about that. Maybe he's wrong. But at the end of the day, it's millions of dollars in a lawsuit to essentially make something happen that no other state is able to do.
Yeah. If it's good and it's just and it's right, then I'm all for it. But give us time to go through the proper process.
And then this was, I just want to speed forward to the end of this. This was the TennCare director who was basically asked, isn't this just like Medicaid expansion? And he was essentially saying, I don't need to play it. It's getting stuck. But basically he said, no, it's not the same thing. So that's happening right now. You should call your reps.
Yes.
That's the situation. And that's what's going on in the legislature this afternoon.
Yeah, 100% call your reps. I mean, if, we just need to continue public pressure on this. I know it's a huge uphill battle, but it's something, this is, probably the most important issue in Tennessee affecting people.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
We were just like,
Matt Anderson called him Representative Great Clips, and he's not wrong. It's not a great haircut, William. I'm sorry.
It's not great. Like, when was it even in
I don't
style?
have great. Like, my hair is not great either. Like, I'm not.
Your hair is fine. It's like
I don't have moral high ground here, but the haircut is fair game.
When was it even in style? Like early 2000s? Like
I don't
for
know,
like a second?
But since Grant brought this up, so this also happened today. This was an aside
hilarious.
During the Block Grant conversation. This was William Lamberth was talking about our federal, the money that we spend and how, we balance our budget, and he was debt shaming the federal government. And Jason Hodges from Clarksville said, basically, wait, where is this thing? Oh, here it is. Yeah, Jason Hodges from Clarksville said, we can't debt shame the federal government. We get our money from the federal government, 40% of our budget.
40% of our budget from the federal government. If my dad is making my mortgage payment, my car payment, I'm budgeting my money every month real well, and then I surely shouldn't blame my dad for being broke.
This is the best. Look at how upset he gets.
Here's the pause.
My wife tells me I should take a breath before I respond to ridiculous comments. I'll do so.
Oh, he's turning red. Look at him. Oh, he's so mad. He's so mad. And the best part of this is Jason was completely right.
Completely right.
Once our budget every year, the federal government continues to spend in a ridiculous manner with no end in sight as to the debt that they are running up, that your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren will have to pay off. But the money we get from the federal government, sir, and you know this, I can't believe you said what you just said, doesn't belong to the federal government. They don't generate wealth. They don't generate anything. They are there to serve us, and it belongs to the people.
Yeah, it belongs to the people.
It does belong to the people.
But
You're
we
just
put
hoarding
in. Gee, I mean, I don't understand. Like, does he not understand this? We put in less than we get out, so we are more dependent on the federal government. There are states that put in more than they take out. You know, like so he doesn't seem to understand this. And then, but then he goes on to say, he goes on to say that we don't use the federal government.
You voted for that budget, if I remember correctly. It's a good, solid budget. So no, sir, we are not balancing our books with federal dollars.
We are not balancing our books with federal dollars is a lie.
Literally, look at the graph. You posted the graph.
Like, yeah, so then the graph comes up. Like, we posted the graph. Look, this is the governor's budget.
Where is
Governor
it coming?
Lee's document. We did not make this. This is the governor's document, and you can see in dark green right there. It says 36% federal funding.
That's a shit ton of money.
36% federal funding. So if you were to take out that 36%, your budget would not be balanced. So yes, you do, William Lambert, balance your budget with federal funding. Either you lied or you don't know that.
He was so mad that I'm like, maybe he just doesn't know, because if it was just a talking point, like, why would he get so angry? I don't understand.
I don't know. Like, it's like he has. So I'm trying to, like, if I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, like, maybe he thinks, I don't know, like does he think it doesn't come, like, that's not the same thing that we're talking? Because the Beacon Center came at us when we said this once. Like, they said the same thing. Like, this isn't really the way it works. Like, are they not just not computing how this works? It's hard for me to understand. But he kept going.
Tennesseans paid in, that Americans paid in.
Yes, Americans paid in.
Representatives, congressmen, and senators fight to get back to us. But yes, they spend way beyond their means. And here in Tennessee, we continue to do a fiscally responsible budget every year. And that's what
our fiscally responsible budget. Like, but see, here's why this is important. This is important because this is their talking point that they use all the time, all over. Wherever you're sitting right now, your representative has recently and often said that we are fiscally responsible, that our budget is balanced, and they do this all the time. And they also rail against the federal government. Those two things are linked. We get our balanced budget in large part from the federal government. And the fact that they refuse to tell that story is a lie. And I don't know if they're lying to themselves, but they're certainly lying to you, and they're definitely lying to the state. And it's a big part of the image that the Tennessee Republican Party puts out there about this fiscal responsibility. But at the end of the day, it's really irresponsible not to raise the revenue we need to do the things we need to do. And we suffer because of it. We suffer by we're number one in medical bankruptcies, we get an F in education funding. So by not having revenue, we don't have programs, and people suffer. And so this is at the core of the argument that this state is having with itself right now. And it doesn't seem like one of the key arguers knows what the fuck is going on. And that is deeply disturbing.
No, I think that you said that so well. It really is at the core of all of this, because it's just a blatant lie every time it comes up. And so they use these federal funds to balance the budget. And meanwhile, they take, funding from a bunch of other places and just hoard it away so that we have this $1 billion rainy day fund that never gets used. It's absurd.
It is wild. It is wild.
And we actually do have someone who called in. I don't know if he's his video's off right now, but Pete.
Okay, well, let's finish this video real quick.
Okay.
And then
Sounds
we'll
good.
go to Pete.
Sounds good. We'll be right there.
To hear from him. Some people are still hanging with us. We appreciate you, but I just want to finish this because Jason gets the last word.
For whatever reason, but I'm not mad about it.
I'm not mad about it. I'm not mad about it.
But I'm not mad.
Literally smoke coming out of his ears.
Pause before he spoke. He had to say a prayer.
You could tell it took years of therapy for him to know that he's supposed to say that.
He would never go to a therapist.
Maybe not.
I should make that assumption.
He wants to be governor.
But like, yeah.
Did we not balance our budget with that money from the federal government?
We utilize federal funds that belong to the taxpayers, to the people of Tennessee, and we utilize that in a way within our budget that all of us have a vote on. So.
Wait, so now we do utilize federal funds in our budget. So literally 30 seconds ago, he said we don't use federal funds to balance our budget. Now he says, wait, I almost need to hear that again, because it's like, what? How do you think this? Like, how is this not? What are you talking about?
Do we not balance our budget with that money from the federal government?
We utilize federal funds.
We utilize federal funds. Okay, we utilize them.
Belong to the taxpayer.
That belong to the taxpayer. Okay, I mean, whatever that means. Sure, go ahead.
People of Tennessee.
People of Tennessee, but also the rest of the country. Okay.
We utilize that in a way within our budget that all of us have a vote on.
We utilize them in a way within our budget that all of us had a vote. How is that not balancing our budget? Like, what are you talking about, dude?
He just said it in the vaguest way possible because he just didn't want to he didn't want to admit that he was completely wrong.
And my favorite is he's talking to Jason like Jason's the idiot here.
Right.
Like Jason's the one that doesn't get it. Oh my goodness.
That's such a good clip though. Yeah.
That's amazing. Let's bring in Pete.
Hey Pete.
Oh, Pete's on the phone. Pete, how are you, sir?
How's it going? I'm sorry.
That's
You're
okay.
Good. So I wanted to call in because I really long time listener, first time caller, but I wanted to. I think that the topic of terrorism is really important, and it's something that we should definitely be addressing. And I've actually got a lot of experience with terrorism. So I was in 2008. I was working for the Arkansas Democratic Party. I was the field director, and I don't know if you remember that, but that is when they had a gunman walk in and start shooting, and he walked into my boss's office, which was Senator Gwatney, who was a longtime senator. If you're familiar with Gwatney in Memphis, the car dealerships, that's his brother. And the gunman walked in and just fired 5 times and assassinated Senator Gwatney.
You were there?
Wow.
I was down the hall.
Oh my God.
I remember thinking why is somebody popping balloons?
Wow.
And
wow. Because you wouldn't think, you wouldn't, yeah.
Right. His assistant came running out of the office crying, and then we saw the guy run, and that's when you knew something bad had just happened.
Do you know who he was? Did he get caught?
He did. He got caught. He took off running. He ran from the police. It turned out it was a guy that had just gotten fired from Target for scrawling graffiti on the wall. He was a Target, and he worked midnight night shift at Target. He had evidently was upset because he had heard him. Gwatney was originally a Clinton delegate, and then he switched to Obama. He was very outspoken about a lot of Democratic ideals. He comes from a family that was very pro-union. His father was a railroad worker, and so
was it? I mean, it sounds like he was on the side. What was he mad about?
He just didn't like the fact that the guy was talking about all these different Democratic issues and stuff like that. And so they were really upset about that. And, so basically that was the last conversation he had. He had set up a target in the back of his backyard, and it was full of a bunch of bullets and stuff like that. But, this was definitely something that was preemptive or premeditated. And and so, but here's the thing: is I remember, just if you remember before that in 2008, there was in New Hampshire, a gunman had gone into Hillary Clinton's campaign and just started shooting people randomly, and it was a similar thing.
It happens, and it's real, and it happens often in this country where everybody is strapped up and angry about stuff, and so I'm sorry that happened. What was your personal reaction to it? Do you feel like you had PTSD from that at all, or?
My personal reaction, when the shooting went off, I saw his secretary come running and crying, and my first initial reaction was I was worried. The first thing I thought of was the Clinton, where the guy went room to room killing people.
Yeah.
And so I talked to our comms director and I said, let's start a safe area over there in the next parking lot. And I walked around to the front of the building and I went in room by room by room and evacuated all of my other fellow coworkers. And then I found my boss, Senator Gwatney. It was a pool of blood. It was
you
really
found
bad.
you found is it him or her? Sorry.
It was him. Yeah, it was
you
Senator,
found him.
Yeah, William Gwatney. And I immediately got down on my knees. I took my shirt off and I started, trying to cover the wound. He was shot 4 times. In the arm, his arm was broken. He twice in the chest, and then a close up right into the side of the head. And so, I just literally, did everything I could. It was lucky. My wife is a physician, and I called her, and I was like, what do I have to do? Like, my boss has just been shot. He's bleeding horribly. I remember him trying to wake up, and he was he was gasping for air. And then it felt like a lifetime of just being there, holding trying to stop the bleeding. And then I remember a detective came in with his gun drawn, and I just remember looking at him and I'm like, I did not.
Wasn't me. Yeah.
Yeah. And he the next thing he said is the gunman still in the room? And I said, no, as far as I know, he's not. And that was another thing, is we didn't know if he's going to come back in and start just grabbing people.
Man. Pete, where are you calling us from today?
Memphis.
Well, we really appreciate you jumping in, man. We're always you get a gold star because we're constantly asking people to jump in.
I want to just really drill down on this. It's the rise of eliminationist rhetoric, of this rhetoric that, and you hear it from Ben Shapiro all the time, is that these guys are bad. When I worked on the Obama campaign, I was part of the healthcare drive and trying to, get Blanche Lincoln to let out a committee. I had a guy walk into my office with a shotgun, and he told me, he says, I just got fired and my boss said that it's because of Obamacare. Wait, Obamacare hadn't even passed yet. And I remember, again, I just think because I dealt with the Gwatney shooting, we rehearsed this, that if anything had ever happened, we had a code word to get everybody out of the office. I sat down and talked to the guy, and I said, look, it's first off, it hasn't even passed yet, but anyway, we sat and talked for like 30 minutes, about what he was dealing with and how he's out of a job. But just moving forward, there's just a lot of bad actors out there, and I just tell people, be brave and be kind, because you just never know what's going to happen.
Sounds like misinformation is the root of a lot of it too. Go ahead, Cassie.
I was just going to say, I'm so sorry that you had to go through all that. I mean, especially the Gwatney situation, but the fact that you had someone come into the Obama campaign with a shotgun as well. I mean, that's all horrifying and really traumatic. So I thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, Pete. Thanks for jumping on here. And
come on anytime.
Definitely anytime you have anything you want to talk about, we appreciate you, especially over in Memphis.
All right, man. Take care, guys.
All right, take
Thank
care.
You.
Gold star for Pete. Pete jumped in. This is Tuesdays, Thursdays. We're here at the Holler Hour. Anybody who wants to jump in, you can jump in, even if you disagree with us about things. It's really, really appreciated. And yes, Kim is saying, can we drop a clip of that video? We posted a clip of the video of Lambert on our feeds, so check it out there. We might have to post the clip of us making fun of it too, though.
We may have to do that.
That was a lot of fun. And I do want to show one other clip before we get out of here. I know you guys have been great being with us this long, but one other thing I just wanted to show, because it really hurt my feelings. And so, I just want to show you, this was my state senator, Jack Johnson. I tried to have a pleasant conversation with him at the Capitol, and this is how it went. Jack, did you sign on to the letter that asked the legislators to vote against the election?
Such a mature senator we've got there.
That really hurt my feelings. I'm really sad. That's my state senator, Jack Johnson.
I can attest, everyone. Justin called me afterwards. He was so upset.
I mean, is that how he talks to all his constituents? Like,
you're a constituent, honestly.
Because I was thinking about it. On the one hand, I'm like, okay, I get it. We're up their ass. And
sure.
But on the other hand, like, that's not okay.
It's still not okay.
It's still not okay. Like, I've never like attacked him in person.
If
like,
you're,
yeah, I say some shit. We say shit on Twitter, you know, and Facebook, but like in person, doesn't he know he's supposed to pretend to be a nice person? He's not supposed to like rip the mask off or the hood off, so to speak, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you are in office, you need, you need to expect that you're going to get shit from your constituents, and every politician should get shit from their constituents. It's like, because that's what it means, you know, that's what it means to be representative at the end of the day. Like we need to do like public pressure, yada, yada, yada. I mean, who does he think he is? Like, just the fact that also that thinks he has that like superiority where he's like able to talk to anyone, media, press, his own constituents in that way is like, just,
it's
such an
wild.
asshole.
It's wild. And like, but honestly, thanks. Like, you know, it really, to me, it makes them look like they deserve to look like that. It's not a good look for them. Good. You know, the camera's going like, all right, act like that. Fine.
Right.
You know, like Robin Smith is the subject of an FBI investigation. Walk into the legislature. I mean, I am no fan of hers at all, but she stood there. She talked to reporters. She said, I'm going to cooperate. And like, I can't say much more. Okay. Like, that's a good look for her. Like, I can't stand her, but
I know
that's how you respond to, that's how you deal with this. Like, it's not that hard.
I saw people comment to our videos saying like, "Oh, she responded really well," and I'm like,
she scored
she's a
points
horrible person, but like, and she does horrible things, but she did like respond well.
Right.
Like,
and like, even when we posted
it was
that,
a better
like,
look for her.
Yeah, I couldn't be like, you know, we didn't shit on her for that. It was like, here's what she did, you know, and pass your own judgment. Like, she handled it a way that she handled it. On the other hand, here's another one while we have some of you here with us. This was Terry Lynn Weaver, who was right after I had left.
She's a fun one.
Right after I left Robin Smith, this was Terry Lynn Weaver over here. She's talking to Jerry Sexton, who defended Rep. David Byrd by saying we all make mistakes. And then the guy in the green jacket is Terry Lynn's husband. And this is how this went.
Serve the District 40.
Oh, and I should preface this by saying Terry Lynn was in DC, and even after the attack on the Capitol, posted like, what a great day it was. And I was in the thick of it, and still is kind of defensive about her role in it. And
she, as far as I've seen, she hasn't commented on the violence of what happened, at least publicly, like, you know, or on social media or anything.
No,
like,
she's pretty far gone, this one.
Yeah.
And my constituents are amazing.
My constituents are amazing. I did nothing wrong.
Violence never did.
Head in the sand.
You still think what happened that day was a positive thing, Terry Lynn?
I didn't see.
Are you talking
I didn't see
about
anything.
Washington?
And then this is Jerry Sexton, who, you know, he turned the other way when Byrd, you know, admitted to molesting high school girls, you know, saying we all make mistakes and invoking God, which I'm sure God wasn't too happy about. And here he's now going to equate the protests against police brutality with a violent attack on our Capitol because this is how they roll.
When they were burning Washington down,
Sure.
Portland, is that what you're talking about?
No,
Portland?
we're talking about the insurrection that you're still running cover for.
You're talking about two different things here, right?
Yeah, is there a reason that you don't want to talk about
And then her husband started grabbing me.
That's insane.
Why are you touching me? Why are you touching me?
You're touching me.
Why are you touching me? Why are you touching me? Is that your husband, Terry Lynn? Is he touching reporters?
Her husband was grabbing me, and that wasn't
insane.
cool.
That was not
cool. You know, he definitely wanted to start something. You know, I mean, he didn't like aggressively grab me, but he had his hand on my arm in a way that was not okay whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so I guess the moral of the story here is like, be more like Robin Smith, which is never the moral of any story.
I can't even.
I mean,
At least in the way that you interact with press and your constituents.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Obviously, obviously they all need to go, but
they all need to go. Go call your reps. Tell them no on the block grant. It's going to pass. There will be a lawsuit because we don't pass laws in Tennessee. We pass lawsuits. But we'll be back Tuesday. We appreciate you guys being here with us. Your support is what keeps us going. Follow all the hollers, especially the Clarksville Holler, which is the new one. Let people know we're here. You guys are the holler. So, you know, everything we have is because of you. You send us the stories. You support what we do. So we really, really appreciate it. And we'll see you next week.
Appreciate it.